Dear respected Thầy, dear respected brother and sister, we've been listening to the talk from Thầy Pháp Xã and the talk from me for the last 2 days, and we are concerning with the possibility of being happy. Whether it is possible to be happy during a difficult time in our life. Is it possible to cultivate happiness so that we can be joyful and happy throughout the day? Many years ago, I was in Plum Village. Time go through quite quickly. I've been here for 12 years now. This September we will celebrate 12th birthday in EIB. Yeah. EIB now become a teenager in the puberty time, teenager. And in the Lower Hamlet, there is a calligraphy in Chinese, and it says Dục An, Đắc An in Chinese. It is in Vietnamese. Dục is if you have the wish, if you have the willingness, if you have the desire. For An is peace. And that is gaining. That is gaining. Achieving is that. Dục is willing. And again, An is peace. If you would like to have peace, you will have peace. If you would like to have happiness, you will have happiness. That's very good news. The other day we talked about our stream of consciousness. In every moment of our conscious activity, our conscious life. Every moment in our conscious life, there are 5 mental activity, or some people call it the 5 mental factor, or the 5 mental quality, or the 5 mental elements. But mainly, it is a part of the process. The 5 elements or the 5 factors that contribute to every movement of conscious, about being conscious. And that is our contact, our feeling, our perception, attention, and karmic volition. Karmic volition. So that is the 5 factors or 5 elements that contribute to a single moment of consciousness, and it happens automatically. So if we don't do anything, that is how our conscious activity is being manifest. This is according to the Northern tradition, to the Yogacara tradition. Yogacara is the my only manifestation school of my manifestation. My only or only manifestation school. That is the school that they, the teaching that they use to teach, so that we can understand our mind. There are many models of the mind. There are the Southern tradition, the Theravada tradition, and the model is a bit different. And then there is other model of Abhidhamma Kosa is different. And then there are other model from later on developed in Tibet, like the Mahamudra model. Then each model is slightly different, depend on the goal of the teaching, the direction, how the teaching want to develop in whatever particular direction. Then there are different teaching, there are different way of understanding how the mind operates, and what kind of elements, what kind of mental factor go into the activity of the mind. But according to the Yogacara tradition, each movement of our conscious awareness, there is 5 factors. If we don't do anything, then our karmic volition will take action. Our karmic volition just manifest due to some condition, and just our old pattern of behavior, old way of thinking just come up. Sometimes the weather is very beautiful, but if we have depression or we have difficulty, then even though the sunshine is very beautiful, we still very sad. We feel very sad. We cannot be in touch with the sunshine that is there, available to us. Our karmic volition take control of us, and our mind is being drifting into the domain of sadness, and we are drowned and we cannot get out. So in Buddhism, this 5 mental factor is called the universal mental factor. Universal mental factor. And there is some mental factor called particular mental factor. There are particular mental factor, that means it does not manifest all the time. It happen, it come to be for a certain condition, for a reason. Sometimes people call this occasional mental factor. It happen on the occasion, not all the time, but only occasion. And in the Yogacara tradition, the particular mental factor has 5, and that is desire or wish or willingness. That is the first factor. And the second factor is conviction. Conviction. That means you believe in something. You are convicted is mindfulness. The fourth is mental collectedness. And the fifth is called insight or understanding. Or knowledge. Depend on knowledge. So these five particular mental factor has to do with this sentence in the Lower Hamlet Meditation Hall. In the Lower Hamlet Meditation Hall, at that time there's a meditation hall called the Red Candle Meditation Hall. Now there's no more Red Candle Meditation Hall. It has been transformed into something else. But that meditation hall is where I became a monk. I was ordained in that meditation hall. Small. It is a barn. It's a barn, a cow, for cow. And Thầy transformed it into a small meditation hall. Very nice. Quite cold during the winter. And underneath this calligraphy, that is where I sleep on the day of mindfulness. Whenever we have the day of mindfulness in the Lower Hamlet, then after the formal lunch, we have some time to rest. Then we have the afternoon activity, and I make a total relaxation there. The Pháp Xã yesterday said that when he came to Plum Village, he developed this habit of taking a total relaxation. Now it's not possible not to have total relaxation. A siesta after lunch. That's what the Pháp Xã said yesterday. So I had also siesta under this calligraphy, Dục An, Đắc An. And if you want to have total relaxation, you will have a total relaxation. So you can apply this calligraphy into every situation of your life. It begins with Dục. Dục is willingness, and that is the first mental factor of the five particular mental factor. This is Dục. What do you like to do? What do you want to have? What you desire to have for your life? That is very important. That is the first elements of the five particular mental factors. It shapes our consciousness. It shapes our life. So ask yourself today, what do I really like for my life? What do I really want to have for my life? Do I want to have sadness? Do I want to be happy? Do I want to be peaceful? Do I want to be joyful? Do I want to be depressed? What do you like to do? And make it firm in your mind what you would like to do for your life. Because these first elements, you give the orientation. So you can think of the first layer of our consciousness, or the first activity, that is the ordinary behavior. That is a normal behavior, ordinary, normal, worldly operation of our consciousness. We just allow our mind drift from one place to another place without any direction. Another layer is go up, is that we have a direction. to have a direction for our life. To have a direction. So you need to define this direction. What do you like to have? Sometimes people understand that Buddhism is very, very pessimistic. Buddhism is the practice of having no desire. But that's not correct. You need to have the desire, but a positive desire, the desire to a positive direction, to a positive consciousness. Good, the desire for goodness, the desire for truth, the desire for beauty, happiness. So desire is very important. Your willingness to do something is very important. Because this willingness takes you out of the ordinary level, allowing ourselves to be drifted by circumstances, like the little piece of cork on the ocean. So the wave just push the cork floating in any direction, and we don't have any direction. But instead of being a cork, now you climb onto a boat. You climb into a boat. So the boat, instead of being drifted in any direction, the boat now have a direction. So this boat is the 5 particular mental factor. It's define a direction. So make sure that tell yourself, what do I want to have today? And it is a meditation practice. It is a practice of looking deeply into the object of our desire. Normally, in the outside world, people have a different object for their desire. For example, money. Money. Some people think that happiness is the time when we have a lot of money to spend. When we can have our money and we can buy anything that we like, that is when we have happiness. So money is an object of our desire. So we ask ourselves, do I want to have a lot of money in our life? Again, this 5 mental factor is very interesting. If you want to have a lot of money, you have money. Because your mind is directing you into that direction. So you will find different means. And if you are fortunate, and if you have good karma, then perhaps you will have a lot of money. Money. The second is sex. Having a lot of sexual activity is an object of desire. Some of us might want to have all kinds of relationship. We jump from one relationship to another relationship. And the first relationship, we are not happy, and we are looking for another relationship. We don't have the capacity to build a relationship, to stay with a relationship, and we just escape from one relationship to another relationship. Some of us want to have fame, power, fame or power or authority. We want to have a full control of our life. It is my life. Nobody can touch it. Nobody can affect my life. That is my life. We don't want to allow anyone to influence us, to give us any advice. We have a full control of our life. We want to be famous. We want to have a lot of authority. And then there is food. We want to eat good food as much as possible. We are looking for drink. We're looking for different kind of drink, different kind of wine, different kind of alcohol, different kind of drug, different kind of movie, violent movie, romantic movie. They are all kind of food. In Buddhism, food here has a 4 parts. The first is edible food. Edible food. That is the food that we consume by our mouth and our nose. We breathe in with our air and we eat the food, and that's called edible food. That means the food we consume by some intake. That is the food. And then there is food is sense impression. Food is sense impression. That means the image that we see, and the advertisement industry, they use this food as impression a lot to manipulate our desire. They create a beautiful advertisement and they exploit human body in different ways so that they can manipulate the confusion of the consumer. They have a very beautiful picture of some lady or some man, and there's a product attached to it. What does it have to do with that man or with that lady? But they create that form, beautiful form, and they attach the product, and our mind is easily be confused. We see beautiful form, and right away we connect it, we associate it with the product, and we feel the product have the same, give us the same pleasure like that picture. And that is food as a sense impression, and there is food as a volition. Food as a volition. That is our deep wish, the thing that we nourish, the thing that we think all the time. We think all the time of that matter, of that issue, and that becomes a part of our food. It maintains our motivation, maintain our life, the direction for our life. Food as a volition. We really want to have that, and we keep having that. Then that becomes a source of motivating us. So food as a volition or as a motivation, and then food as a consciousness. Food is consciousness. Food as a consciousness is the thing that we have learned. It become a part of our old experience, and now that old experience come up, and we eat that again. And that's called food as consciousness. So this morning, Sister Song Ngim practiced food as consciousness with everyone. You think of happy moment, 3 happy moments today, from the morning until now. You think about those happy moments, you bring it up again, and you consume that happiness again, and that becomes food as consciousness. It is inside your consciousness, this experience, and you bring it up. And then she said that since the beginning of the retreat until now, what are the most happy moments? So we think of those happy moments and we relive, we re-experience that moment of happiness, and that becomes a source of food for us. So food is a consciousness. We record experience and we consume that experience one more time. We experience that that moment again. Food is a consciousness. And then the fifth object about desire is that sleeping. We want to have a lot of sleeping. We want to have a lot of rest. We don't want to do anything. We become sluggish. We become inactive. We don't want to do anything. We just drag along. So these are usually the 5 objects of the desire that in Buddhism people talk about. And these are unwholesome objects of desire. These are the unwholesome, according to Buddhism. They don't give you the true happiness. These are not really, it doesn't give you true happiness. So do not give rise to true happiness. Do not give rise to true happiness. So today, take some time and ask yourself, what is the direction that you would like to have for your desire? The first factor of the 5 particular mental factors. What is the object about desire? What is the object about desire? Are these category object about desire? And Buddhism or the Buddha proposed another object of desire. Another object of desire that can give us a lot of happiness. The Buddha the Buddha was enlightened, and then he went from the village called Uruvela to the town nowadays is called Banaras. And he went there, and he looked for his 5 friends, his 5 companions who practiced together with him before he became a Buddha. And then after that, he continued his journey, and one day he was in a forest. And there was a group of young men, about 60 of them, about 60 young men. They had a party. They had a party. They went to the forest, the group of 60 young men, just about the size of our group, but at that time there was no coronavirus, so they are free to be close to each other instead of sitting in social distance right now. So they go into the forest, they have fun, and they hire some dancer with them. In the Indian society, there are dancers. They perform dance and they entertain the people. So these young men went to the forest, they have some dancer, and then they have a good time, and they go to sleep. The next day they wake up, and all of their belongings have been taken away. These 60 young men, they are rich, they are from the rich family. So they have beautiful clothes, they have jewels, they have, how do you say, ornament, jewelry, ornament with them. But when they wake up, all of their precious or valuable belongings have been taken away by these dancers. So they search for they wake up and they search for these dancers, and by chance they saw the Buddha. And the Buddha, they asked the Buddha, do you see the dancer, this girl who passed by here? The Buddha said, no, I've been here for the whole morning, but I didn't see anyone pass by here. Then the Buddha proposed to the young man, but my dear friends, what do you think? My dear friends, is it better for you to look for yourself, or is it better for you to look for this dancer? These dancers are a kind of object of desire. To have some kind of fun, ordinary fun, worldly fun. And the Buddha was very compassionate. Do you want to look for yourself, or do you want to look for this dancer? These young men, they are very fortunate. Listening to the Buddha only one sentence and they wake up. They wake up to happiness. some door, some light penetrate into their consciousness. They said, obviously, Buddha, it's better to look for ourselves instead of looking for the dancer. So the Buddha, yes, it's right. And then he began to give the teaching, and slowly, after listening to his Dharma talk for an hour or two, they all become monks and nuns. Really, that is the first group, 60 monks. 60 monks. First is the 5 of his companion, and the second is 60 young men. He ordained 60 young men to become a monk after the first Dharma talk. After, not really the first Dharma talk, after his talk. Only for a few hours, he was able to convince these young men a different object of desire. And what is that object of desire? That is our true happiness. That is to be able to return to ourselves and to find ourselves. So, the object of this desire gives us an orientation. And then if we contemplate about that direction, then it leads to something called conviction. We believe in that object of desire. And you see here, in the Yogacara tradition, the mindfulness factor here, this mindfulness factor here is the elements of being there together, but depend on the object of the desire. The mindfulness can lead to can lead to good or bad result depending on the object of your desire. Mindfulness is the capacity to be there. Mindfulness is the capacity to be there, to hold your attention, to hold your awareness for a duration of time on that particular object. So in this scheme of consciousness, mindfulness can go either way. It can go either into right mindfulness, or it can go to wrong mindfulness. Depend on the object of your desire. So let's say you have this bad intention, bad wish, and you keep thinking about it, and you are very mindful about your act so that you can achieve this bad intention. Then you also have mindfulness, but this time it's called bad mindfulness. It's not right mindfulness. But then in the Theravada tradition, they define mindfulness differently. So you have to be careful which tradition that you talk about, and which kind of practice that you are in. In the Theravada tradition, mindfulness is a mental factor belong to the wholesome mental formation, not in the particular mental factor. They have a different mental factor. The occasional mental factor in the Theravada tradition is different from the Yogacara tradition. In the Yogacara tradition, mindfulness belongs to the 5 particular mental factor. So depending on the object of your desire, you can also practice mindfulness. But it can turn out to be the wrong mindfulness. So be very careful. But if the object of desire is a good, wholesome object, then mindfulness will become right mindfulness. And we listen to one sound of the bell before we continue on. Yesterday, Thầy Pháp Xã said that when he was pay attendance, Thầy asked him a question. If I understand Thầy Pháp Xã correctly through the translator, is that Thầy asked him the question. Here in the community, every monk and every nun have the same teacher, have the same teaching, have the same environment. But how can some monks and nuns are very happy, and some monks and nuns are not very happy? They have a lot of difficulty. If I remember That's what he said. He can correct me later on. And he said that he discovered that very early in his practice that the people who are successful in the community, the monks and the nuns who are happy in the community, because they learn to focus their mind on the good things. They learn to focus their mind on the good thing instead of the negative thing in the community. If I remember, that's what he said briefly. So if we focus on the good things, continue to focus on the good things, then what happens is from the first mental factor, it leads to the second mental factor that's called conviction or belief. Conviction or belief that, for example, let's say we focus our mind onto a negative things. At first, it's only a possibility. We look at the negative things and we said, well, there could be a possibility for good thing and negative things. But then if we concentrate our mind continuously on the negative thing, then we are convinced that it's bad things. We are convinced, it becomes a conviction within us that thing is bad. And then it becomes a belief. We believe the reality is like that. At first, some brother or some sister might say one negative things. And we just listen. It doesn't cause the effect on our consciousness yet. But if we continue to contemplate, we continue to focus on this negative thing, then come to the point that we are convinced that thing is really bad. So let's say during the time of the coronavirus. Yes, the coronavirus is very dangerous virus. And if all of the media go into the direction that telling all of us collectively that the coronavirus is very bad, is very dangerous, and they begin to water the energy of fear, the energy of uncertainty within us, and then come to the point it becomes a conviction. We are convinced that coronavirus is a terrible virus, and we become paralyzed. We cannot do anything else. We are so afraid to step out of our home because it's so dangerous. And what we perceive become blown up, become bigger. That is one of the possibility. Another possibility is that coronavirus is very dangerous virus, but we don't care. We said, oh, there's nothing. It's just like a normal flu. There's nothing serious, and we don't care about it. And then after a while, we also convinced that coronavirus is not dangerous. So we can go either to one extreme of do not care, or we are too afraid to act. The Buddha gave the teaching called the teaching on the middle way. That means, yes, the coronavirus is dangerous. We have to pay attention. But we should not paralyze ourselves. Yes, the coronavirus is dangerous, and we should not be careless about it. That is the attitude that the Buddha usually tries to convince. We give the reality a second bout. But we also always in the position of being active. Active. So this mental factor, desire or wish, if we pay attention on that, then sometimes it become a conviction. We believe it is like that. If we want to be happy, and we really want to be happy, and we tell ourselves that happiness is possible, and then if we have that intention that happiness is possible, it's possible to be joyful, to be happy, then it's very interesting. Our mind begin to work into that direction. We begin to collect little happiness in our daily life. Everywhere we go, we begin to feel happy. We begin to feel joyful. We begin to collect this little flower of happiness. And then slowly, after some time, it becomes a conviction within us. Oh, happiness is possible. It's a part of life. I don't have to be sad. I don't have to be depressed. Happiness is something possible. So if you have this deep desire for happiness, then happiness will come. And that is the calligraphy in the Red Candle Hall in Plum Village. I used to have depression because of the war in Vietnam. I told you the first night. And when I first came to Plum Village, I used to be very sad. And before I come to Plum Village, there are days outside in my university day. Sometimes I just sit there in the afternoon and tears just come down to my eyes. And then some of my close friends told me that I should go to a psychologist or a psychotherapist, because it seemed like my behavior is not quite normal. That suddenly I just feel sad, and sadness took over me and tears coming down. They saw that. So they advised that I should go to a psychotherapist or psychiatrist. But I said, well, I've been that way since I was young. Because without meditation, without practice, I didn't know that I had been wounded as a little child during the war of Vietnam. And this block of sadness, this block of depression slowly take the hold of me. And I begin to look into things around me with this block of sadness. And it come to a conviction within me that, oh, life is really sad. Life is really sad. Nothing is really joyful. There, from time to time, there is some joy, some happiness, but it doesn't last very long, and nothing really inspires me to be very happy. So most of the time, as my consciousness spend its time in the hole or in the cave of depression. But then, after being in Plum Village for some years, and I practiced meditation, I learned to go back to my block of sadness and try to understand where it comes from. So what I practice is I I just calm my body down, calm my mind down for some time, and I begin to bring this block of sadness. I try to recall this block of sadness and I embrace it with my love. And then when I embrace with my love, then this block of sadness slowly begin to calm down. I was not caught in this emotion of being sadness. This sadness, this movement of sadness begin to calm down. I'm able to embrace it. And then there come the time that I discover that when I was a little boy, very young, that night, that day, in the afternoon, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, the military people come and camp in the front of my house. Look very sad. The whole yard, the whole field is with military men with gun and with all of the machine gun and so on. And it was a bit raining, and it's about getting dark. And I remember very clearly that little boy was so afraid, and I climbed into this cabinet and I looked out, and it was very interesting that I was very young, but this thought come to my mind that there's no future. I don't want to grow up. I really don't want to grow up. There's no point for me to grow up, and I don't see any future in my life. I was so young, only 4 or 5 years old, but I already have such a perception. I thought to myself, if I grow up, I will hold a gun and I will kill someone, or someone will kill me. What is the point of growing up? And this perception, this outlook, slowly take hold of me, and it become a conviction, it become a belief within me that there's no point of growing up. There's no future in my life. So after I discovered this, I know where my problem is. It is exactly this perception that there's no future. I don't see the beauty in life. I don't see the goodness in life. So I have to change my perception. So when I was in Plum Village those days, there is a walking meditation path from where I can see the sunset. That is the time when these block of wounded begin to manifest, usually around sunset time. When I was young, after this block become very active, then around the sunset time, I begin to develop pain, migraine. And my father took me to the hospital, but they couldn't find out why I have the migraine, the pain, the headache on that particular time. So from that walking meditation path, I am able to walk and look at the sunset, and I tell myself, with each of the steps, this is really beautiful. This is really beautiful. I look at the grass, I look at the flower, and I said, this is truly beautiful. And then I tell myself, this is true happiness. This is true happiness. And I try to feel happy within me. Even though at that time, tears come down, I feel very sad, but I tell myself, it is true happiness. It's true happiness. It is truly beautiful. It's truly beautiful. And I train myself I begin to train this first elements, the particular mental factor. I have the deep desire for beauty. I have the deep desire for happiness. This is true happiness. This is true happiness. This is truly beautiful. I look at each of the flower and I learn to be with the flower and to try to get out of the prison of sadness that I was caught in. This block of sadness is like a prison. The block of depression is like the prison. It captures us and we are inside. And I tell myself, this is truly happiness. Now, there's no war. Now, I'm in peace. I'm in a good environment. I'm in a good environment. There's no war around me. I'm truly happy. I'm truly, it's possible for me to be happy now. And I tell myself that I walk, and each of my steps, I walk very slowly. And I allow my tear come down. But at the same time, I give a new perception. I begin to embrace. And then after some time, what happened is that from this desire, this deep willingness, it gives rise to the second mental factor that is called conviction, belief. Usually, we are our belief. We are our conviction. If we are convicted that coronavirus is extremely dangerous, and we believe that it's very dangerous, that the moment we go out, we meet anyone, we can be infected, and it becomes a conviction, it's a belief within us, then we will act on that belief. We are our belief. And the Buddha advised us that we need to practice the middle way with respect to our belief. The middle way is the practice in which we don't go into one particular extreme, extreme of this and extreme of that. We learn to take both in the consideration. So when I walk, I learn to recognize my sadness. I learn to embrace it with my love. I don't reject it. I don't say that, no, please not to be there. No. It is a part of my history. It's a part of my life. I am a son of the war of Vietnam. Yes, it is a reality. It is a part of my history. It's a part of myself. It's the block of pain within me. Yes, I accept it. I recognize it. But the Buddha also give me the possibility of the practice of middle way. Yes, I can enjoy my happiness while I'm still having this block within me. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to have this wounded, but do not let this wounded overwhelm me and take over my life. It has its position. It has its own particular space in my life. But allowing myself to have different space, and that is the teaching of the middle way. When we practice cultivating happiness, it doesn't mean that we deny all of our suffering, denying all of our sadness. No, it's a part of our life. We learn to recognize it, embrace it, and respected it with all of our compassion, but allow ourselves to have another space, to open up a new space within us. And that is our practice, the practice of the middle way. We allow ourselves to touch happiness. When I escaped to America, I escaped alone by myself. I was 16 years old when I first planning my escape out of Vietnam. And after I came to America, the first Christmas, everyone was very happy. My uncle family was very happy. All of my cousins, they were very happy. During the Christmas time in America, Christmas is very important time. But I feel I am in conflict because my parents and my family are still in Vietnam. And that is the end of 1980, the beginning of the Christmas 1980, when I was my first Christmas in America, 1980. During that time, Vietnam undergone a very bad situation. The economy was so bad. And my father sent me letter, and the paper was so dark brown. The quality is so bad. You can barely distinguish the ink from the background of the paper. The black ink and the brown paper, they are so close. It's so difficult to read the letter. So I know knew that my family was having very hard time. Was having very hard time. And I said, how can I be happy here in America while my family is going through deep suffering there in Vietnam? So I wrote on my diary a poem. I used to write a lot of poems in my diary book, and I contemplate about that deeply. Then somehow, luckily, there comes this insight. I said, well, my parents sent me out of Vietnam because they want me to be happy. They want me to be happy and happy life. So now I have escaped, I have succeeded, now I came to America. So there's nothing wrong of being happy. I can also be happy while being very mindful of the sadness, the difficulty that my family is going through. They want punish, or they want jealous, or they want have negative feeling about my happiness, because that's what they want. And my duty when I'm in America is try to be as happy as possible. That is my duty. I have to live my life as beautiful as possible, as happy as possible, in order to pay back the debt that my parents have done their best to make my escape. So I get out of it, and I learn to participate in the happiness of my cousin, in the happiness of my uncle's family. So it's possible to have both happiness and difficulty. We learn to respect both. But we learn to allow ourselves the chance to be happy, even though there are still pain and sorrow within us. And if we have just enough happiness, then we can begin to engage with life. Happiness is the capacity to be there for life, to engage with life, to be a part of life. Happiness is the feeling that in the hot summer you are standing on the bank of the river and you jump down to the river and it's very cool and it's very fresh. So happiness is the capacity to engage, to be a part of life that is going on. And once you believe that happiness is possible, then there come the element of mindfulness. Mindfulness is the elements that help to hold that conviction, that help to hold that object of the desire. In this case, is a good desire. Mindfulness will help to strengthen it. At the beginning, mindfulness is not there. We do not have a duration of happiness. First, we have the desire to be happy, and we are convinced that happiness is possible. And then, if that convinced is long enough, then there comes mindfulness. Mindfulness, in this case, is the capacity to hold it for as long as possible. In this particular case, mindfulness prolong our experience of this object of desire. For example, our object of desire is we want to be happy. We want to be happy. Then, when we are convicted that my life will be full of happiness, then the mental factor called mindfulness will come in and will help to maintain the duration of the sense of happy within us. And when we are able to prolong this experience, then come mental collectedness. At this moment, we are our happiness. We are one with our happiness, mental collectedness. Here, happiness only is a kind of idea, a kind of notion. Until mindfulness, we extend that notion. But mental collectedness, we are happiness. We are happiness. That is the element of mental collectedness. Our whole being radiates happiness. Our whole existence, we become one with happiness. In the Tai Chi practice or Qigong practice in the morning, we collect the positive energy of the whole universe, and we bring all of the positive energy into our heart. And if you remember, we have some contemplation. I am positive. I am goodness. I am beauty. I am truth. And that is the element called mental collectedness. You become one with that object of the desire. You embody it. Your whole being become that. At first, happiness is only a mental factor in the mind. You feel happy. But then, when you practice cultivating happiness and become a conviction in your mind that I can be happy, I am happiness, And then the practice of mindfulness will hold that of happiness, prolong that state of happiness to the point that you become happiness. You embody happiness. You are happiness. Your hand move in happiness. Your eyes move in happiness. Your smile is happiness. Everything in your body radiates happiness. And that's called mental collectedness. We can reach this. Someone who are fortunate, we touch that person, we already feel happy. Happiness radiates out from that person naturally. His eye, her eye is happiness. His eye, his hands movement, her hands movement is happiness. We can feel the joy, you know. And perhaps Sister Samgim is someone who embodied that. This energy of positiveness and activeness and liveliness. When you see her, you already feel active. You want to do something. And if you see me because I embody passiveness, you feel I sleep. So each one of us, once we believe in something, when we believe in something, the energy of mindfulness will turn that belief into a kind of embodiment. And then insight, knowledge come. Insight or understanding or knowledge is that you know. In the inside know, the inside is knowing that you are happiness. That is the knowledge. Knowing in this sense is not an intellectual knowing, but it is a confirmation of who you are. That is knowledge. Here, mental collectedness, you embody happiness, but the mental factor inside or understand is a kind of reflexive awareness. You look up on you and confirm yourself that you are happiness. Someone in the Buddhist literature, someone who become a Arahat, and then that person, after he had embodied nirvana, he had embodied the liberation, then the last stage is that I know that I have put down all of my heavy things. I have done what is need to be done. What need to be done for a liberate one, I have done it. And that is knowledge. It's a conviction that you have reached that goal. Before that, there's still some doubt. But the knowledge comes, yes, I am that. Yes, I have attained that. But attaining here is like a confirmation. I have put down all of my burden and I have done what needs to be done. The task is done, finished. Okay, so that is the end of the talk. What needs to be said has already been said. So, good luck with cultivating your happiness. Welcome happiness to your house. We listen to Three Sound the Bell to end our talk for today.